He's a f***ing moron. Rex Tillerson, Trump's Secretary of State. He tries to divide us. James Mattis, Trump's Secretary of Defense, an idiot. John Kelly, Trump's Chief of Staff. A professional liar. Gary Cohn, Trump's economic advisor. He thinks he's God. Barbara Rez, SVP of Trump Organization. Like an 11-year-old child. Steve Bannon, Trump's advisor.
I don't take responsibility.
I think we need to look harder at who we elect.
I don't think he's fit for office.
Trump knew exactly what was going on. He was aware of all of my movements. I wouldn't do anything without the consent of Rudy Giuliani or the president.
Rudy Giuliani's former associate, Lev Parnas, insists he was working on President Trump's behalf when he pressured Ukrainian leaders.
It was never about corruption. It was strictly about the Burisma, which included Hunter Biden and Joe Biden.
President Trump has denied even knowing Parnas.
He lied. I mean, me and him didn't watch football games together. We didn't eat hot dogs, but he knew exactly who we were.
Parnas says that while he was pushing for an investigation into the Bidens, his connection to the president was made clear to the Ukrainians.
We put Rudy on the phone. Rudy relayed to him basically that we were there on behalf of the President of the United States.
In a statement to MSNBC, Giuliani denied doing that. Parnas says his connection to the White House was evident when the vice president canceled his trip to President Zelensky's May 20th inauguration.
It's completely transparent. Donald Trump's tax returns aren't. I'd like to see those be transparent. And people start to see that he says he's for the little guy, but he's actually built a lot of his businesses on the backs of the little guy. And a lot of little guys through eminent domain or through not paying contractors after you've built something. The little guys have suffered. So they're starting to talk about victims of Trump University, victims of Trump in Atlantic City. Before that, it was his conservative apostasies. Now it's actually you're for the little guy, but you've built your business on the backs of the little guy. Yeah. And insulting them as lying Ted and John Kasich, who eats like a slob, and everything else that was said today, which is fairly unpresidential. But it shows you the danger of just saying things that aren't true and getting people to believe it and getting 20,000 people in a rally today to just lap it up as if it's true. And I think people will think thrice now when they go into that ballot box and say, look, I've tried to send a message all along through Donald Trump to the establishment, but now I got to get serious about sending somebody to the White House.
Kaylee, how sick of polls are people in New Hampshire right now?
Probably very sick, especially when they see that Donald Trump is #2 and doesn't deserve to be there.
Okay, what do you think of the Trump excitement? What do you chalk that up?
I appreciate his boldness, and I think some of his rhetoric got the base excited, but it is not welcome rhetoric. Look, the GOP doesn't need to be turning away voters and isolating them. We need to be bringing them into the tent. Donald Trump is the last person who's going to do that.
Good people.
I want to make clear I don't support what Donald Trump said. I think he said something very inartful, very inappropriate. However, he was hitting at a real issue in this country. Well, I think that the stance of most Republicans is we've got to plug the border, but I think the mainstream Republican does not want to send the illegal immigrant back to Mexico. I think that they're here to stay. That's not the American way. We're not going to ship people across the border. There has to be some path to citizenship. Donald Trump has shown himself to be a showman. I don't think he's a serious candidate.
Kaylee, this is your guy. He's #2 in the polls.
Hey, I don't want to claim this guy. Donald Trump, if we're going to be honest, is a progressive. He supports eminent domain. He's supported tax increases before. He's donated $300,000 to Democratic candidates. So the fact that the Republican Party is now having to claim him is both unfortunate and, to me, inauthentic, because this is not a true Republican candidate. And the fact that he's being portrayed as such in media is troublesome and not accurate.
Our reporting begins this Monday with President Trump's latest misleading and xenophobic eruption of distraction and division. He decries fake news that isn't and disseminates fake news that is. Think China pays the tariffs. The wall is going up. Historic inauguration crowds. Russia probe is a witch hunt. You need an ID to buy cereal. Noise from windmills causes cancer. It's endless. There is no known evidence to support President Trump's conspiracy theories about Biden's activities, as we have reported here repeatedly. The president also said in the tweet that the wall is going up rapidly. It is not. As we just reported, there is no new wall. The forecast showed East Coast Dorian. The Sharpie's magical addition added the coast of Alabama. Why would the President of the United States do this?
Let's turn back to tax reform, because we're up 142 right now. We're getting awfully close to that 25K level. The House is going to be voting on the final tax bill tomorrow afternoon. Now, the president keeps touting this as the biggest tax cut ever. And while it's great for corporations, and there's nothing wrong with that, and it's also great for a lot of fat cat private equity investors, and there's something wrong with that, like this guy, Steve Schwartzman, who has made over $400 million in 1 year. And percentage-wise, well, guess what? His tax bracket is actually lower than a New York City cop. How do you like that? And it's because he calls his income investment. The president promised to fix this, remember?
There are reasons the hedge fund managers are all donating to Hillary Clinton's campaign and not to mine. Everybody getting rich off the rigged system and who want nothing to change and nothing, they don't want anything to change.
He just didn't charge him with obstruction.
Those are two very different things, Jesse, and he outlines legally why he could not, under the existing Justice Department guidelines, charge the president. He outlines a case for obstruction and then in plain text says it's up to the Congress to decide if this obstruction of justice, which, by the way, has been part of 2 articles of impeachment for Nixon and Clinton, obstruction of justice, if this rises to the level.
That's what he said.
This highlighting here is pretty close reading. But he said very clearly, I am not saying the president did not commit obstruction of justice. He also does not say there's no collusion. He says there's no conspiracy or coordination that rose to the level of criminal standards. So he is not, and then he outlines very clearly multiple contacts between the Trump administration and Russians.
Yeah, but is that illegal?
Is that illegal? My final point on that, to answer Dan's question, I think we should have higher standards for our president than whether things are illegal. I read this and thought it may not be illegal. I find it abhorrent. I find it unethical. I think it's nothing that any other Democratic or Republican
Should he have fewer rights than you? Should he have fewer rights than you?
I don't think that any other presidential campaign, Democratic or Republican, would ever engage in this kind of behavior. And I don't want my president doing it.
Should he have less?
Yes, I love the idea of lower corporate taxes, but I really do not like what they're doing on the individual side. And my concern here is it's going to hurt the individual. And so effectively, individuals are carrying the water for these corporations. They get that great tax cut, but on the corporate side, but people are not going to get it on the individual side. And I just don't think that's fair, because look at what the president had been promising everyone basically all year.
We're going to lower the rates very, very substantially for virtually everybody in every category, including personal and business. Going to give the American people a huge tax cut for Christmas. Hopefully that will be a great, big, beautiful Christmas present.
I don't think it's going to be much of a present. It's a little like getting coal in your stocking here, because your tax bill is going to go up. So what are the chances that maybe the House and Senate just put aside the individual plan right now and just focus on the corporate? Well, I guess they can't do that.
President Trump is fond of calling out the media on fake news, but is he the one giving them very real ammunition? Your own words on lots of stuff give me, shall I say, lots of pause. Like the time you said the Russians didn't interfere in the 2016 election, until a lot of Republicans had to remind you they did. Like when you claimed your tax plan was the biggest in U.S. history, or that your job approval numbers really aren't that bad relative to other presidents at this stage, when they're actually worse than most presidents at this stage, or that your former chief of staff, Reince Priebus, wasn't going anywhere until he was, when you absolutely loved Steve Bannon until you didn't, swore by Jeff Sessions until you started swearing at Jeff Sessions. Now, none of this makes you evil, but I'm sure you can understand why even your friends say these inconsistencies don't make you look good.
Having something to do with paying some Stormy Daniels woman $130,000, I mean, which is going to turn out to be perfectly legal. That money was not campaign money. Sorry, I'm giving you a fact now that you don't know. It's not campaign money. No campaign finance violation. So
they funneled it through the law firm.
Funneled through the law firm, and the president repaid it.
All this stuff you keep blurting out, remarkably bad and remarkably bad timing. Like when you said there was a serious voter fraud in New Hampshire, and there wasn't. Or that millions of illegals voted in the last election, but they didn't. I guess you've been too busy draining the swamp to ever stop and smell the stink you're creating.
Judge, but let me just say, we live in politically polarized times, and if you're talking about who likes division, President Trump's pushes buttons of division and polarization quite regularly. I think you'll remember he started his campaign by going after.
I know you were critical of Fox yesterday. You came out and you tweeted Fox News heavily promoting the Democrats through the DNC communications director, spewing out whatever she wanted.
Absolutely.
So you were very upset.
No, I'm not happy with Fox.
All right, well, I think the president watches Fox. I also think he is getting sick of Fox, which is weird because I think he gets pretty fair coverage at Fox. But the president making clear to fact check him is to be all but dead to him, and his legion of supporters who let me know in no uncertain terms I am either with him totally or I am a never Trumper fully. There are no grays, no middle ground. You're either all in or you're just out. Loyal on everything or not to be trusted on anything, which could explain the president himself this week bashing Fox News yet again, urging his supporters to stop watching the channel, to quote tweet, "Fox isn't working for us anymore." Well, first of all, Mr. President, we don't work for you. I don't work for you. My job is to cover you, not fawn over you or rip you, just report on you, to call balls and strikes on you. My job, Mr. President, our job here is to keep the scores, not settle scores. Now, in my case, to report the economic numbers when they're good and when they're bad, when the markets are soaring and when they're tumbling, when trade talks look like they're coming together and when they look like they're falling apart. It is called being fair and balanced, Mr. President, yet it is fair to say you're not a fan when that balance includes stuff you don't like to hear or facts you don't like to have questioned. You're only human. I get that. Who likes to be corrected? But you are the president. It comes with the job, just like checking what you say and do comes with my job. After all, I'm not the one who said tariffs are a wonderful thing. You are. Just like I'm not the one who said Mexico would pay for the wall. You did. Just like I'm not the one who claimed that Russia didn't meddle in the 2016 election. You did. Now, I'm sorry you don't like these facts being brought up, but they are not fake because I did. What would be fake is if I never did. If I ignored all the times you said you loved your old Secretary of State, Rex Tillerson, until you didn't. Had no plans to dump your Homeland Security Secretary until you did. Called Chinese President Xi Jinping an enemy just last week and a great leader this week. Sometimes you don't even wait that long. Last week, you expressed an appetite for background checks before arguing just hours later our background checks are already strong. These aren't fake items. They're real items, and you really said them. Just like you never paid to silence a porn star until it turns out you did. Never ordered your former White House counsel Don McGahn to fire Bob Mueller until we learned you tried. Fake is when it's wrong, Mr. President, not when it's unpleasant. Just like it isn't and wasn't fake when you said the Access Hollywood tape wasn't real when it was, or that you inherited a depression from Barack Obama when you didn't, or that you ripped quantitative easing when he was president, but are furious the Federal Reserve isn't doing the same for you now that you're president. You're entitled to your point of view, Mr. President, but you're not entitled to your own set of facts. Now, we can argue over whether you ever wanted to buy Greenland or disrupt hurricanes with nuclear weapons, but where seeds are planted, doubts are sown. You're right to say the media isn't fair to you, that they're more inclined to report the bad than anything good about you. So it is no surprise you're frustrated that more aren't in line with you, and that everyone at Fox might not be in lockstep with you. You might even think that those who are work for you. They don't. I don't. Hard as it is to fathom, Mr. President, just because you're the leader of the free world doesn't entitle you to a free pass. Unfortunately, just a free press. Good night.
But while I'll be a Democratic candidate, I will be an American president. I'll work hard for those who didn't support me, as hard for them as I did for those who did vote for me.